Welcome to our visitors. It's a blessing to have you with us, and we just pray that you'll enjoy services this morning. We've been looking through what? Beatitudes. Okay. Alright, so no different this morning. Did change the background because when we were testing yesterday, the darker backgrounds didn't quite work in here, so hopefully you can see that fine. Title of this message is up there is the benefits of showing mercy. Okay, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 5 verse 7 this morning. Most of the scriptures will come up on the screen, so if you don't have Bibles, it will be there. Today we're going to be looking at the 5th Beatitude found in Matthew 5:7, and it says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy." The word blessed, as we've seen before, but means much more than happy. It has the idea of being congratulated or completed or fulfilled. The word blessed means all of these wonderful things. You know, we say happy are these, but it's more than that. If we listen carefully, we can hear the applause of heaven when we put into practice these 8 Beatitudes, or these 8 character qualities that will be looked at some and we'll be carrying on to look at the others. As we look at what it means to be merciful, we come to a transition from the first 4, which focus on our need. Okay, the first 4 focuses on our need. We are bankrupt in spirit and broken with grief, which leads to meekness and an insatiable hunger for righteousness. So we're moving from that now more from our need to what we need to do. Okay? From our belief to our behaviour. From our situation to our responsibility. The principal Hebrew word for mercy speaks of an emotional response to the needs of others. It means to feel the pain of another so deeply that we're compelled to do something about it. In fact, people in Bible times believe that the seat of emotions was found in the intestinal area, okay? That's why the King James Version uses the phrase, bowels of mercy. Alright? It's deep. It's down in our guts. Yeah? That's where we're looking at. That's how we're supposed to feel. William Barclay defines mercy this way: to get inside someone's skin until we can see things with his eyes. Think things with his mind and feel things with his feelings, to move in and act on behalf of those who are hurting. I thought that was so fantastic way of putting it, because until we're walk a mile in someone's moccasins, we don't understand where they're at. And this is what it's talking about, getting inside someone else's feelings, inside what they're going through, because it will help us to see mercy. Mercy can be defined as good will toward the afflicted, joined with a desire to relieve them. Goodwill toward the afflicted, joined with a desire to relieve them. That is what it means. This idea is captured in Matthew 14:14, where it says, when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. He had mercy on them. The word compassion means that Jesus was so moved that his stomach churned and literally his bowels yearned for the crowd. That is how he felt. Notice that this churning led him to do something about it. He saw the need and then he went into action. Mercy in theory is absolutely meaningless. Okay? We can have all the theoretical knowledge of mercy, but it's meaningless unless it moves us. It needs to move us to something. In addition, the emphasis in this beatitude is on those who are inclined to show mercy as a lifestyle, not those who are merciful on an occasional basis. See, it's designed that we should be moving with mercy all of the time in our lives, not just occasionally and then we feel good about it. Mercy is a God-like characteristic, and Scripture is filled with references to this part of his innate nature. Deuteronomy 4:31. Can you guys actually see that as a... No, you can just... Yeah, okay. To work on backgrounds that are going to actually work, but yeah. Deuteronomy 4:31 says, "For the Lord your God is a merciful God." Nehemiah 9:31, "But in your great mercy you do not put an end to them or abandon them, for you are gracious and merciful God." Psalms 119 verse 132 says, "Turn to me and have mercy on me, as you always do to those who love your name." Daniel 9:18, "We do not make request of you because we are righteous, but because of your great mercy." Micah 7:18-19, "Who is a God like you, who pardons sin and forgives the transgressions of the remnant of his inheritance? You do not stay angry forever, but delight to show mercy. You will again have compassion on us. You will tread our sins underfoot and hurl all our iniquities into the depths of the sea." New Testament, Ephesians 2:4, "God who is rich in mercy." James 5:11, "The Lord is full of compassion and mercy." There is no doubt that God is merciful towards each one of us, as He not only withholds what we deserve, but He also turns towards us and meets our deepest needs. You see, while we can't always count on a man or a woman's mercy, we can rely on the compassion of God. Now, David, after spending 9 months taking a census of the people in his kingdom, in 2 Samuel 24, David became conscience-stricken and confessed what he did to the Lord. Interestingly, God gave David 3 options for his punishment. He didn't have to think about it long, because he realised that it would be much better to throw himself on the mercy of the majesty than to allow men to do what they wanted to him. You see in verse 14 of 2 Samuel 24, it says, "I am in deep distress. Let us fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is great, but do not let me fall into the hands of men." You see, God is merciful. We as humankind are not so merciful. Nowhere do we imitate God more than when we show mercy, because we're never more like Him when our compassion goes into action. Luke 6:36 links our mandate to extend mercy with the model that God sets for us. It says, "Be merciful just as your Father is merciful." The message of the Bible is clear. If we say that we follow the Almighty, we must emulate Him. That's what Christ-like means, isn't it, Christian? Christ-like. There are 6 ways that God wants us to create a community of compassion. Firstly, fall in love with mercy. Micah 6:8 makes it clear that one of God's requirements is that we are to love mercy and to lose ourselves in its exquisite beauty. The Hebrew word is used of a husband's love for his wife and appears frequently in the Songs of Solomon. So we're to fall in love with mercy. We're to demonstrate mercy. Zechariah 7:9 says, "Show mercy and compassion to one another." We're to respond to mercy. Romans 12:1 states that because of God's mercy, we are to offer our bodies as a living sacrifice. We're to put on mercy. Just as we get dressed each day, so too Colossians 3:12 says that we are to clothe ourselves with compassion, with mercy. Ministry must flow from mercy. In 2 Corinthians 4:1, Paul links the mercy he has received to the ministry he has been given. He says, since through God's mercy we have this ministry. Now think about this. We have this ministry as a church family, this building we've got now, because of God's mercy. because of his compassion for us. Default to mercy. In a very strong passage, James 2:3 reminds us that we are to grant mercy to others instead of judgment. He says judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Mercy triumphs over judgment. See, Jesus certainly demonstrates mercy, and he expected his followers to exhibit it. When we think about it, some of us are pretty merciless towards people who sin differently than us. Did you get that point? Every one of us sin. Every one of us have done things wrong and do things wrong. But we love to not show so much mercy to someone who sins differently to us. Unfortunately, those who are the most religious are often those who are the most rigid and unmerciful. On two different occasions in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus quoted Isaiah 6:6 to show that mercy is a mandate, not an option. In the first instance, found in Matthew 9:13, Jesus confronts those who were judging him for spending time with sinners. He says, "But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice." And in Matthew 12, the Pharisees play gotcha. Okay? If you don't understand what the game is, there's a really good one for fencing. They play gotcha, yeah? And you get so close and you say gotcha, and they have to stand still and you stab it, yeah? But you've got to get your timing right, alright? But this is what the Pharisees are doing. They're saying, "Oh, gotcha." They play with Jesus when they supposedly catch the disciples doing something wrong by picking some grain on the Sabbath. Jesus takes these religious experts back to Hosea in order to show that they are missing the magnificence of mercy. Verse 7 says, "If you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent." See, if the religious people back then needed to learn that God desires mercy above any sacrifice that can be made, then I suspect that you and I need to be taught how to be merciful as well. You see, it's our nature to criticise and withhold forgiveness, isn't it? It's also way too natural for us to ignore real needs when we see them because we're wrapped up in our own world. Jesus told two parables to help us understand the two sides of mercy. The first one's found in Matthew 18 and emphasises the need to extend forgiveness because in God's mercy, He has forgiven us. Mercy releases the debt. And when you think about that, when Jesus paid the price for our salvation on the cross, He went to the cross to give us the opportunity to be able to have a home in heaven. Simply for us to ask for it, to believe that He did that for us. And we need to ask Him for the forgiveness of the sins, anything we do wrong. And He'll give us that home in heaven one day. So that's the first one, where He forgives us and mercy releases the debt. The second narrative is found in Luke 10 and is known as the story of the Good Samaritan. You see, in this account, Jesus establishes that our feelings of compassion must be fleshed out in action. Mercy also restores the downtrodden. We can say it this way: mercy embraces both forgiveness for the guilty and compassion for the suffering. Please turn, if you're in Matthew 5, turn to Matthew 18. And we're going to be going through these a little bit. They will come up on the screen as well. But in Matthew 18, Peter came up to Jesus and asked Him a question. Matthew 18, verse 21. And it says, "Lord, How many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? You see, before Jesus could answer this, he already provided an answer, up to 7 times. So Peter wasn't really asking how many times. He was proposing, this is what I think. The rabbis back in this time taught that you had to forgive someone 3 times. That sounds like Peter, doesn't it? And then you could retaliate. Awesome. 3, yeah? So Peter, being so spiritual, that he doubled that number and then added 1 and thought himself being fantastic. So I only have to forgive 7 times, yeah? As Jesus often does, his answer to Peter was unexpected and disarming. If we look at verse 22, it says, I tell you, not 7 times, but 70 times 7 times. 70 times 7 means there is no limit to the number of times we are to forgive someone, because we can't keep score when it comes to forgiveness. Mercy has a maddening quality about it, because by definition it is undeserved, unmerited, and it's unfair. Since the truth of forgiveness without limits is hard for us to grasp, Jesus told a story to help illustrate what he meant. It says, therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. Now the king sent out his collection agents, and they came back with a man who owed the equivalent of about $25 million. Okay? In today's day and age. Since he couldn't pay the debt, verse 25 says that the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this point, the servant did what most of us would have done. He fell on his knees and said, be patient with me, and I'll pay back everything. The king was moved. The Bible says that he was filled with compassion, and that's the other word for mercy. And the king not only sets him free, but he releases him from the debt. This is exactly what mercy is all about. To extend mercy is to cancel the debt. The servant did not deserve his forgiveness. It was purely an act of mercy on the part of the king. Now, as this humble man walked away with his wonderful gift of forgiveness, he ran into a buddy in the street that owed him $10. Instead of cancelling the debt, verse 28 says that he grabbed him and began to choke him, saying, pay back what you owe me. Jesus continues by telling us that the forgiven man's friend fell to his knees and asked for some mercy. In fact, his plea was almost identical to the other man's when he was before the king. Be patient with me and I'll pay you back. But there was one big difference. Instead of forgiving the wrong out of gratitude for the forgiveness he had received, in verse 30 it says he went off and had the man thrown in prison until he could pay the debt. I want to pause here for a moment and make an application. We're a lot like this man when we don't forgive others. We enjoy putting people in prison when they wrong us, don't we? Because we want them to suffer and to hurt as bad as they hurt us. Now, that could be a metaphorical prison, yeah? We treat them like they're in prison. Word got around, and soon everyone was talking about what had happened. It wasn't the fact that the man would not forgive his friend that shocked them. It was the fact that he was so unforgiving after finding such great mercy and grace himself. We find in verses 32 and 34 that the king is really mad now. He sends the soldiers to bring the man before him. He says, "You wicked servant, I cancelled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" In anger, his master turned him over to the torturers until he paid back all he owed. Now let me say this strongly. What happened to that man will happen to each of us unless we learn to give mercy and forgive wrongs. The hidden torturers of anger and bitterness will eat your insides out. As you lie awake at night stewing over every wrong that someone has done to you. When we choose to not forgive, we are imprisoned in the past and locked out of all potential for change. Have you ever noticed that some of the most miserable people in the world are those who are unwilling to be merciful? Lewis Meads has said, "When I genuinely forgive, I set a prisoner free, and then discover that that prisoner I set free was me." Now this isn't easy, folks, I know, because we're human, and we're prone to want to get back when someone does us wrong. But just remember this. You're the one who's going to be the prisoner, not them. Now the first half of showing mercy is to release the debts of those that have done wrong. The second part has to do with restoring those who are downtrodden. In Luke 10:25-37, Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritan in response to a lawyer's question in which he was looking for a love loophole, a legal limit so he would know who he had to help and who he could ignore. And who is my neighbour? Jesus answers by saying that a man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, a distance of 22 miles. Now this road winds through the mountains and was known as the Bloody Way, because thieves and robbers used to ambush unsuspecting travellers. And that's exactly what happened one day as robbers attacked a man, stripped him of his clothes and left him half dead. This story gives us a very vivid picture of 4 dimensions of mercy. Firstly, notion. This is always the first step. We must notice someone in need before we'll do anything about meeting that need. The priest, the Levite, and the Samaritan all saw the man, but only one perceived a person in trouble. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed on the other side. Both of these religious men had come from God's presence, but somehow God's presence never got through to them. But a Samaritan, as he travelled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, this is an interesting twist, because Jews and Samaritans hated each other. And the Samaritans were considered racial and religious heretics. But the Samaritan had a notion that something was wrong and slowed down. Emma Bombeck shares an interesting story about a time that she was waiting for a flight in an airport. And I think this is really kind of where things are at today for us. And you'll see after I say the illustration. But she was reading a book in an effort to shut out the commotion around her. So she's sitting in the airport reading a book. A voice next to me belonging to an elderly woman said, "I'll bet it's cold in Chicago." Stone-faced, I replied, "It's likely." Back into a book. "I haven't been to Chicago in 3 years," the old lady persisted. "My son lives there." "That's nice." I said, my eyes intent on my book. Then she said, "My husband's body is on this plane. We've been married 53 years. Bombeck continues, "I I don't think I ever detested myself more than I did at that moment. Another human being was screaming to be heard, and in desperation had turned to a cold stranger who was more interested in a novel than in the real drama at her elbow. She talked numbly and steadily until we boarded the plane, then found her seat in another section. As I hung up my coat, I heard her plaintive voice say to her seat companion, "I'll bet it's cold in Chicago." There are people all around us that have needs. Do you have any notion of the needs around you? Here's a simple prayer that will help each of us. Lord, let me see people through your eyes. Now, I'm guilty of this personally. I go to a waiting room or a hospital, and what comes out? It's not a book. It's a phone. You walk into a fish and chip shop, those that still get takeaways. What do you do when you sit down in the waiting room waiting for your fish and chips? There's been a few times I've actually consciously gone, oh, put that away. And you know what? The old person, because generally they're old, and I'm there as well, but sit there and start to chat. What are we doing? Are we seeing the needs? So firstly is notion, second is emotion. All three saw the need, but only the Samaritan felt the need. He took pity on him. This word pity is the word that means to have intensity in the intestines. Okay? Someone put it this way, mercy begins when your hurt comes into my heart. He was shaken up when he saw the man who was beaten down. If anyone should care in this world, it should be Christians. It should be you and I. We need to have that kind of reputation in this community. We are now visible. Were we before? Yeah, we were, but we weren't. We already had two people from across the road, Salvation, come in and see us. They're looking. What is our look going to be? So we need a notion, then we need emotion, and then we need motion. The Samaritan saw the need, felt for the man, and then went into action. We see this in verse 34. He went to him. True mercy always involves motion. Now this next little bit of illustration I'm going to bring out actually speaks of what we're like today, more than what we want to know. One pastor wrote, see, pastor, hold our hands up. I was walking down the street of the town, and as I looked over toward a doorway, I noticed a derelict lying on the ground. Sand and old newspapers were blowing up around his body. He'd passed out. He was just lying there. All up and down that busy street, well-dressed people were walking, going about their business. Many of them looked down at the piece of humanity on the ground, but nobody stopped to help. Nobody did anything. And then he said, after we'd gone to dinner and come back, that man was still lying there. I could not believe that nobody had done anything. Can you think about that? That is who we are. Now, as a side note, we cannot help every derelict person on the side of the street. Today, there are things in place, there are agencies in place for people that need help or want help. Yeah? I'm not advocating that we have to go and pick every person off the street up. Some of those people are there by their choice. A lot of them are there by their choice. But we see someone fall over, we see someone get hurt. What do? Turn the other way and keep going because we're too busy. Let someone else deal with it. Some of us see needs and shake our heads. Others of us feel bad for those in pain. And those who move to meet needs are demonstrating mercy. Notion, emotion, motion, and then devotion. When the Samaritan had a notion that something was wrong, he was moved in his emotions. He went into motion and then he demonstrated devotion as he bandaged the man's wounds. Put him on his own donkey, which meant he had to walk. Took him to an inn and took care of him. See, the next day he gave the innkeeper 2 silver coins, which represented 2 days' wages. He even promised to come back and take care of any extra expenses. Jesus changes the question from who is my neighbour to whose neighbour am I? Whose neighbour am I? The first question focuses on the claim that others have on my time and resources. The second question reframes reality to what I owe to the suffering people all around me. The issue is one of character, not of criteria. About being a neighbour, not defining a neighbour. And the answer comes in verse 37. The one who had mercy on him, Jesus then tells them and us, go and do likewise. Brethren, your neighbour is anyone in need. And you are a neighbour when you minister mercy to the downtrodden. Will you walk on by? Will you be too busy on your phone when people communicate? Start with the need that is near you, and you'll be reminded of the nearness of Jesus in your own life. Mercy always demands that we do something. Adrian Rogers says that there are 3 classes of people in the community. I found this quite amusing. There's the beater-uppers, those who steal, kill and destroy. That's not the amusing part, folks. These people say, what's yours is mine and I'm going to get it. There's the passer-uppers, those who see the need but walk on by. What's mine is mine and I'm going to keep it. And then there's the picker-uppers, those who move from notion to emotion, to motion to devotion. What's mine is yours, and I'm going to help you. Jesus declares that those who are merciful will be shown mercy. This is the only beatitude where the promise is the same as the condition. The more we understand how much mercy we've received, the more we'll give to others. And the more mercy we show, the more mercy we get. The reason the merciful will receive mercy is that they have already received mercy. And it is the very thing that makes them merciful. See, instead of judging others, we can offer people something that they don't deserve. Unqualified mercy. I want to just mention 2 action steps. They are short, so don't worry. Who do you need to release from debt today? Forgiveness is the virtue we most enjoy but least employ. We love getting forgiveness, but we don't employ it very often. Nothing proves more clearly that we've been recipients of mercy than our own readiness to forgive. Jesus forgave you. Jesus forgives you. And secondly, what downtrodden person can you restore this week? You don't necessarily have to go looking for someone, because God will bring people along your path. What will you do? Will you be a taker, a keeper, or a giver? Determine right now to move from notion to emotion to motion to devotion. When Frederick II, an 18th century king of Prussia, went on an inspection tour of a prison, he was greeted with the cries of prisoners who fell on their knees and protested their unjust punishment. While listening to these pleas of innocence, the king's eye was caught by a solitary figure in the corner, a prisoner seemingly unconcerned with all the commotion. King Frederick called out to him, "Why are you here?" The prisoner replied, "Armed robbery, Your Majesty." The king then asked, "Were you guilty?" To which the prisoner answered, "Oh yes, indeed, Your Majesty. I entirely deserve my punishment." At that, the king commanded the jailer, "Release this guilty man at once. I will not have him kept in this prison where he will corrupt all the fine innocent people who occupy it." We're all guilty. And the sooner we admit it, the better off we'll be. I just want to close with some verses. So if you want to close your eyes, you can, so you can take them in. I want to read some cries for mercy found in the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew 9:27 tells us, as Jesus went on from there, two blind men followed him, calling out, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." 15:22, a Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him, crying out, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is suffering terribly." 17:14-15, when they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him, "Lord, have mercy on my son." Verse 20:29-34, two blind men were sitting by the roadside. When they heard that Jesus was going by, they shouted, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." The crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet. But they shouted all the louder, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." Jesus stopped and called them. "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. "Lord," they answered, "we want our sight." Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes. Immediately they received their sight and followed him. Matthew 5:7. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. It's time to show mercy as you have been shown mercy. Pastor John, you close out with a prayer.